Alright guys, so today is a very exciting day since I am starting on the first mock-up for the first piece in my pattern project slash patterns through the decade series. So this is the box that I've been storing them in, and let's open it up. Oh, on top we have this beautiful Mockup pattern, which is a wonderful late 19th century walking suit that comes in sizes 4 to 18 that you should definitely check out. It's designed by the very talented Angela Clayton. Just kidding, this is actually my bin for all of my patterns and I just so happen to have that one on top. So let's go through this and find the one for the 20th century skirt. Here it is. So this was actually one of the most expensive patterns that I purchased. I can't remember if it was $25, $30, or $35, but it did not come cheap. And since it was so expensive, I did open this up and iron all the pieces shortly after receiving it. Unfortunately, it is missing the waistbands, so I will have to redraft that today, as well as making any alterations that I feel are necessary to get this to fit me. I'm going to be treating all of these patterns like I would any modern pattern and making mock-ups first to ensure that they fit me properly over the appropriate foundation. Some people might think that's kind of cheating, but I want to give all of these patterns a fair chance, and I really believe that regardless of what decade it comes from, you should test your patterns before using them to construct a final garment. Because even if the pattern says it's your size, you don't know how much ease is going to be provided and what sort of shape those measurements were originally attached to. So it's very, very important to make your mock-up ahead of time, which is what I'm going to be doing today. I'm also a pretty tall lady, so I have a feeling that this is going to be too short for me. So here's a close-up of the pattern. As you can see, it's a really nice pleated Edwardian skirt pattern. It was originally 15 cents, and it is made for someone with a 26-inch waist and a 44-inch hip measurement. So as you can tell, that waist is probably pretty heavily corseted. Now a 44-inch hip measurement would probably be paired with a 36-inch waist measurement or something similar to that. I know I personally have a 28-inch waist and 40-inch hips, and I'm considered on the curvier end of what modern clothing is made for. So it's definitely important to make a mock-up for this and any alterations before I cut into the beautiful black wool that I'll be using for this. So the only instructions for this pattern are back here, which doesn't seem very thorough, especially compared to modern patterns, but let's see if we can figure it out and make a worthy mock-up, which will give us all the information we need to know when it comes to altering this. It's also worth noting that patterns from this period did not have any writing on them. Instead, they were marked with perforations in the material. So instead of them writing A on a pattern piece, they would actually have dots that would outline an A. And you're going to see that consistently into patterns from the 1940s or even 50s, if I recall correctly. So on the back of this, it says ladies 8-cord skirt panel with inserted pleated sections in round or shorter length. And there are 8 pieces: the front gore, side gores, back gore, front inserted piece, back inserted piece, and belt. And it is the belt that is missing. And annoyingly, the seller for this did not give me a partial refund for that missing piece, even though it said it was a complete pattern when I purchased it, which I'm only a little bit bitter about. So this does have pretty specific cutting instructions. I'm not too concerned about the grain line of my mock-up, but I will definitely keep those in mind when cutting it out from the final fabric. And yeah, let's just get this laid out and see how it goes. Look guys, I'm one of the 3 people that pay for YouTube Red and Google Play Music. Haha, I'm gonna listen to the Moana soundtrack. Okay, so from my understanding, these little marks mean that it has to align with a fold. So there's this long piece that has to go on a fold, and there's another similar one, which I'm assuming goes at the back, which also needs to be on a fold. I just checked the instructions and it says all seams allowed, which I'm assuming means there is seam allowance. So I'm going to work with that assumption moving forward when cutting this out. I had a little panic moment assuming that there weren't seams, but I think there are, so let's hope that there are. Otherwise this is going to be very, very tiny and make me feel very bad about myself. I also switched my mock-up fabric from black broadcloth to a flannel because I am going to be using a wool flannel for this skirt, and I feel like this is a little bit closer to its texture. I'm a little worried I won't have enough fabric to cut this out. I'm definitely gonna have enough of the flannel, but when it comes to the wool, I might run a little bit short, but we shall see. And yeah, this is going to be a bit of an adventure. Okay, so I think I get what they mean. They were talking about different grain lines for these pieces, and I think they intend for these long ones to be cut out this way on the fabric, so you have enough width left to cut out these pleated panels without wasting a lot of material. So this doesn't make a huge impact on my mock-up, but that's definitely going to be important when it comes to having enough material to complete this. So definitely going to try and remember that for future, and I'm going to go ahead and move this piece just so I can make sure that my fabric will be wide enough for me to actually do that. Guys, doesn't this totally look like a face? Look.
My name is Mr. Pattern, and I'm going to help you make the skirt.
I promise I'm mostly mentally stable. My camera died partway through, but I got everything cut out and labeled. I also clipped all of the necessary markings, and I now realize the mere presence of these means that seam allowance was probably included in this pattern, so I shouldn't have panicked as much at the beginning. I'm still a little worried that I won't have enough material to cut this out of my top fabric, but we will deal with that when the time comes. I went ahead and pleated the lower panels. These were really, really easy to do. They had the pleats marked with little dots on the pattern, and I just connected the dots and then ironed it in place and top stitched around it, as shown in this image. And just before doing any other construction, I looked up what lapped seams were, since that's what this calls for. I've always thought lapped seams were just when you turn the top piece of fabric's edge inward, then you top stitch it to a piece of material below it, as opposed to doing a traditional seam with the right sides pinned together. This was a very common technique used in the 30s and 40s, and even earlier in the 20th century. I just did a quick Google search to make sure I was right about that, and a lot of people seem to be using the term lapped seams and flat felled seams interchangeably. I just consulted this First Steps in Dressmaking book, which is a textbook from the 1930s, and it shows lapped seams as being what I thought they were. So I'm going to go ahead and follow this diagram rather than a lot of the tutorials I'm seeing online, since I think this is a more accurate representation of what would have been done in 1908. It's a little bit closer to that time than we are in this day and age. So yeah, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and try and figure out which pieces go together. I'm definitely going to be pinning the top portions of these panels and sewing those before I do up the side seams. The instructions here, I mean, they're a little vague. This is just telling you what the different perforations mean, not actual instructions. And then these are just cutting instructions. So this little diagram is basically all of the instructions that we have. So it does say to do the pleats first, and then I'm going to go ahead and do this joining, and then I will do the lapped seams and placket and belt. So yeah, that's what we're working with, and I will show you what it looks like when I've got the next couple of panels pinned together. Alright, so I've gone ahead and marked all of the necessary lines onto my pattern pieces. So these are the ones that the other pieces will be lapped over. So I just marked where I want the folded edge of the other pieces to line up with, which is a ½ inch away from the edges. And then at the bottom here, I marked 1 inch away from the edge, and I'm going to fold this edge inward until it touches that point. And for all of the other pieces, I also marked 1 inch away from all the edges, or side edges, I suppose. So now I can fold this edge inward to get a nice ½ inch pressed seam allowance. So I just finished sewing the tops onto the pleated panels, and that was really easy to do. There were 2 notches on these panels and 1 notch on the other, so it was very easy to figure out what had to line up. So I got all of those done, and when doing this I experimented a little bit with the stitch length and also how far away from the edge I placed it. I think I like how this looks, but I might end up putting on one of my special top stitching feet and doing it a little bit closer. I also totally gave up on ironing these because lapped seams are more difficult to alter than normally sewn seams, and though it gives a better finish, I don't need a particularly good finish on this mock-up. I'm making it purely for practical purposes. So I think I'm just going to do these seams normally, and then for the final thing I will actually lap the seams and go through that process. So some of the perforations in the pattern pieces are difficult to read, which makes this challenging. Like the front piece was supposed to be T, but I very clearly wrote an F because it looked like an F to me. And then I wasn't sure if these were the front panels because they say H, and I thought it might be easier to get an H confused with a T than an F, but I think I've got it sorted out now. And the back panel was a similar situation. I clearly misread it and mismarked the piece, but I think I have everything right. I'm just gonna have to be a little bit more careful about that when I'm doing the final thing. But the notches have definitely helped. So I think if I put the gored panel in, it'll fit between these two. Yay, success. So now I'm just going to pin everything like this. And I actually just mostly put these notches in by eye, and instead of lining up the notches, I'm just lining up the top of the material, which I know isn't how you're supposed to do it, but I didn't want to accidentally cut further into the tissue paper until I was doing the final video on this project. So this was sort of more just so I know where the pieces go rather than to get them perfectly lined up. I will be a lot more careful on the finished garment though, I can promise you that. And in case you couldn't tell by the lovely flannels I'm using, this isn't meant to be a wearable mock-up. Now off to the machine. So it's all sewn together now except for the hem and also the waistband because the waistband wasn't included in this pattern. This went together really easily, however there are points where the side panels are longer than the front panels, so that's definitely an alteration that I'm going to have to make. But just as a little spoiler, I think I'm gonna have to change the length overall. This is at least 2 inches too short for me, and the Edwardian shoes I'm gonna pair with this are gonna add another inch or two to my height. So I definitely have to make this longer. Not sure if I'm going to do that for the hem or if I'm going to split the pieces here so it keeps some of its original proportion. Because these pieces look a lot shorter on me than the ones here. I have a feeling this sketch is a sample for the smallest size, so they look narrower since they're on a slimmer figure, but they remain the same length. At least that's my assumption. This skirt is also very big. Like, it has a 35-inch waistline, and I don't see how the waistband gets gathered down or anything to make that smaller. It does seem to look like it dips down, which would add a little bit more width to it, but I don't think it would add that much. I can double check the pattern and see if I made the seams too large. I guess it could expect 3/4 one. I just ran out of space on that card, but I just said I was going to go check the seam allowances on the pattern. These markings show where you were supposed to sew, and to me, that looks like a 1/2 inch allowance to me. Exactly 1/2 inch. It does look like some of these are closer to 5/8 of an inch, but I think that's just an error. It seems to be more consistently 1/2 inch seam allowances. So the fact that it's that wide is kind of odd. I'm going to go ahead and do a fitting without my corset just to make sure it fits me in my hips and stuff, since that isn't going to change that much with the corset. And then I will probably make some alterations before trying it on over the corset because I think this is going to be massive on me. This is why we make mock-up. So this is without a corset. With a corset, my waist will be at least 2 inches smaller. And as you can see, I already have about 6 inches of excess material here. So I think I'm going to just take room out of the seam allowances and then everything will get an equal amount smaller. And I'm not sure, I'll go through and do the math, whether I'd be taking 1/2 inch or a full inch out of each seam. So once that's done, I will report back. But yeah, this definitely isn't the look I was going for, and I'm really not sure what happened because I think I did everything correct. So I just took this in by 10 inches at the waist. I went through all of the seams and made them a 1/2 inch smaller. And by that I mean I took a 1/2 inch out of each side, so each seam is a total of 1 inch smaller, as you can see here. So this is where I originally sewed and this is where I sewed now. So I'm taking a 1/2 inch away from each piece that goes into this. So that ended up being 8 inches, and then I actually took the top in by another 1/2 inch at the very back as well as one of the seams at the front, so it'll curve over my bum a little bit better. And that should bring me down to the original 26-inch waist that was listed on this, which is I believe my waist measurement with the corset I'm going to be wearing with this. The corset is shown in another Patreon exclusive video, or at least it's Patreon exclusive right now, which I will link in the upper corner somewhere as well as the description box down below. I'm also going to wear it over this combination set, so it adds a slight bit of volume at the hem, but not a lot, since it's a relatively slim style. So let's get the corset on and do a fitting. Also, I haven't drafted the waistband yet. I feel like the waistband would sew on top of the skirt panel, sort of like a facing. I'm not sure why I feel like that's the case, but that's just how I think it would be. So I think I'm going to try it on without one. If I feel like it's necessary, then I can go ahead and draft one after the fitting. But yeah, this is the current plan. So I just did the first fitting over my corset and it went amazingly well. I really like the shape of it. It fit beautifully after my alterations. The only real issue is the length. I also feel like the waistband, I'm going to attach it like a facing, just like I said earlier, except the facing will be flipped outward. This sits relatively high on the waist and I think that's going to give it the most accurate shape. I do not have the waistband pattern, so I don't know what it was originally supposed to look like. So I'm just going to trace around this top edge and then transfer that to paper and add seam allowances, and I'm gonna call that it. But yeah, this fit really, really nicely. So now I have to somehow get all of my alterations from this, including adding 3.5 inches to the hem at points, onto my paper. And I don't really want to cut this apart or attach tape to it or do anything that will ruin its integrity, because it is a piece of history. This is, you know, 120 years old almost. And this is 110 years old or something, and I don't want to do anything to damage it beyond actually using it. So I think I'm just going to use a pencil to mark the alterations onto this so I can keep those in mind when cutting it out. The ones I'm most concerned about forgetting is, of course, the additional hem allowance at the bottom, as well as the places that need to be taken in by more than just an inch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew all the seams as 1 inch instead of 1/2 inch, and then I don't have to cut down the pieces individually or cut down the pattern. That's a very simple alteration. It'll also give me room to take this out in the future if that becomes necessary. Knock on wood. But the ones that I am going to make markings about are the ones that need to be taken in by 1.5 inches, because I'm just not going to remember to do that for all of them. And I can also mark where the tapering of that should begin and taper into the 1 inch seam allowance. So that is what I am going to do, and then once that's done, I just have to draft the waistband. So I will show you that process. So I've gone ahead and marked the tapering down points onto all the pattern pieces, as well as the hem allowance I'm going to add. I want to have a 2-inch hem on everything, but some pieces are too short to touch the ground to begin with, so they're going to be getting an extra 2.5 inches. Yes, it is that short on me. You're probably going to see me adding a lot of additional room for the hems on these pieces, just because I'm tall, and usually have to do that for modern patterns, much less ones from 100 years ago. Now it is time to draft the waistband, and from what I can tell from this, it looks like the waistband was a single piece, and then it closes at the side back just like the skirt does. So to make this a little bit easier to work with, I'm just going to cut the top off of my mock-up. Now that I've fitted this and marked the alterations onto the pattern, I don't feel like I need it. And for this specific part, we only need the top couple of inches to work with. So the center of this piece is the center back line, and then this is going to be the closure. So now I'm just going to trace around this. So I don't know how much seam allowance I'm actually going to need, but I think I'm going to add 1 inch to each side just to be safe. And then I want the waistband to be, their waistband looks like it's about 3/4 inch to me, so that's what I'm going to go with. Alright, so I started by measuring 3/4 inch away from this, and then I realized that the top half of this is going to be seam allowance. So I'm actually going to go ahead and mark out the seam allowance first. So now that the seam allowance is marked, I'm going to measure 3/4 inch away from that edge. And now let's add a 1/2 inch seam allowance on the bottom of that. And I'm also just going to go ahead and mark the center front line onto this, since I feel that is important. And now I'm just going to give this a name so people will know what this piece is. And that is my waistband, and now this skirt pattern is ready to be constructed. I hope you enjoyed this behind the scenes video, and if you want to see it actually get sewn together, then you should definitely watch the video that is currently linked on screen. And I shall talk to all of you guys very soon.